Okay, Novastar here again, and if you've been following this series so far, I don't really need an introduction for it, and I don't need to introduce myself. So let's get right to it, shall we? Let's talk about diet. Yeah, right? Eating. Boy, no one would ever think of that one, maybe, right? I don't know, maybe you did, but you really should pay attention to your body's needs for eating and whatnot. I recommend protein shakes, is usually what I do. Um, these kind of things are going to differ, of course, for everyone, just almost like with the workout and the stretching and the warming up and this kind of thing. So you have to identify what's good for you, but it's very true that there's some things that are just not refutable. Like it's important that after a pretty strong workout that you want to usually like eat a banana. You want to eat right away after a workout, and it's also a good idea to give yourself some carbohydrates and protein before working out, so that you end up burning the fuel that you're looking to burn instead of burning muscle. And anyways, I can go into a huge diatribe with this, but just consider diet. Think about that. Maybe less beer, less fast foods, less, just shoving something into your mouth before going and doing this thing, and having some kind of process with it. And again, I recommend, and I can't even talk here, I recommend protein shakes because they're really helpful. I use whey protein. I like that. And, I'll just use throwing a bunch of frozen fruit in there, hopefully some natural, not processed frozen fruit and whatnot. And that kind of helps act as your ice to a certain extent. So you don't have to do much. Like if you are in a hurry, better to make a protein shake and throw it in the blender rather than warm up I don't know, a processed hot dog, or grab some processed meat and, this kind of thing. What else can I say about diet? Drink a lot of water. Like, what's the big deal? Like, what's the harm in that? I tend to even like the carbonated water. I think that's great. Just sparkling water. That's it. And pretty much stay away from sodas. Every now and then I'm gonna have one of those. That's fine, especially if it's an energy drink. But I watch the sugar levels on those. So that's another thing I guess I could say about diet here is just look at the labels. Look at the bloody labels. Sometimes you'll be like, oh, cool, I'll just make something up. Iced tea, that sounds good. And you pick it up, turn it around, and it's like 46 grams of sugar. And you're like, are you serious? So it's like, wow. And then you look at even the serving, and it's like, that's for one serving. It's going to give me 46 grams of sugar for one iced tea. Are you like what are they, crazy? Like, what are they doing here? But it is entirely possible you could pick that up and just assume that there'd only be blah 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 sugars when it's double or triple, or I don't know. But the point is simple: read the labels. Read the labels. Or again, just control what you're doing and don't buy anything that's processed. I mean, there's not a lot of worry with when you buy water. It's water. Hopefully it's not filled with a bunch of junk. All right, so good enough. That's diet. Spent about 3.5 minutes on that. That seems right. And of course, I could say lots of other kinds of things like, actually, I'll give you one little small hint that I've learned recently. It's very important when I do the Vader thing that I try to carb up beforehand, like lots of carbs, like excess. And there's a lot of reasoning for that. I won't go into all of it because it can be kind of creepy or whatever, but it does have to do with, because I'm so cooped up in the costume, it's really the sweat and the loss of salt. You'll physically see salt appear on my costume at a certain point because I get so hot and I'm doing so much work. But anyway, let's move on to something else. So again, sort of a complete departure. What about the distance people are away from each other? Okay, so how far you are from your teammates or your partner or whoever it is. That is a very difficult one, and all I can say with that is you either both have to be massively dedicated, okay, and or saying, let's meet in the middle, like, if you live, I don't know, 40 miles away from each other, so drive 20 miles and they drive 20, something. Or, and this is always the hard one, you gotta pick, I don't want to say better partners, but people who you're like, this will be more effective because you and I are in the same city, or we're, 5 minutes away or 10 minutes away, and so forth and so forth. there's not always a way to get around that. How often I've had people tell me, Matthew, why don't you have this and you should have that, and why don't you get this guy and you could have that guy and this, and I'm like, all these, where are you going to get all these people? Where do you think they come from? They don't just fall out of the sky into my lap and be like, hi, I'm ready to be your Darth Vader today, or whatever it is. It takes building these relationships with people. And again, it comes back to this discipline and consistency thing, and it takes multiple people, and the more people you involve, the more you rely on everyone, each other. Everybody relies kind of cohesively together, and if one person bails, it can affect the whole group. And often people don't, I don't want to say they don't realize it, but they just don't care. They just don't, it's not a concern for them. Like if one person's like, yeah, I'm not going to rehearsal today, they don't really think about it in terms of, I'm affecting a whole bunch of other people right now by me being a dumbass and not going. They're just thinking, hey, I'm not going tonight because I want to see a movie, or I got this to do and this stuff. And sometimes it's legitimate, and other times they're just literally just, I don't want to be there today. And instead of them realizing that it affects many, they're only thinking of it like, well, what's the big deal? If I don't go, that's just on me. It's not on anyone else. And again, they don't realize, a team is not a team if you don't give a damn about one another. So it's important also that you get the right people on your projects as well. So it's a double-edged sword, pardon the pun. It's a double-edged saber, a multi-edged saber. But how far people are away, sometimes the best people you can work with end up being further away from you. And maybe someone you'd rather not work with as much is closer. So you just have to pick your poison on that and say, well, I'm willing to do the distance if they're worth it and that I can count on them or they can count on me. So there you go. What's one last thing? Oh, finding people. I got about 3 minutes left here, so that's a tough one. I'm not a good marketer, so this is probably not a great question for me, but I'm like, you have to put in the footwork. You have to post on Facebook, hey, we're looking for new people. When you meet more people, when you do events, you want to casually mention to some of them, the people who express a little bit more interest, you want to say, by the way, if you're interested in learning more, come on out. We'll meet on Thursdays and we do blah, 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 blah. Whatever you need to say to people. I don't mean you need to proselyte to them. They may not like that. They may not like it if you make a giant announcement in a group of 100. And by the way, we're recruiting now, so get your asses in here. That may not fly. It may be better for you to think about it like, yeah, this person's asking me a lot of questions. Where did you get your sabers? Oh my gosh, you built them? And I just don't understand. It must be so hot in that costume. And tell me more. And those are the people that you might want to consider, throwing the extra cards to or materials to and saying, you should come meet with us on Thursdays. It's totally cool, man. Just come out one time. If you don't like it or if you don't think it's something that's going to go somewhere for you, that's all right, no problem. But also keep in mind, tell people the truth that, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. And, it's that fantasy world that they see. Everybody sees the end result, but they don't see the work that is sort of the invisible logistics, I often call it. That's the body of the iceberg. So, right, everybody sees the tip of the iceberg because that's the only thing jutting out of the ocean. But that iceberg's been growing and growing and growing. It's been happening under wraps. And then suddenly, boom, out comes a performance. Nobody gets that. They just look at it like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could suit up as, name your character, and wouldn't it be cool if I could have my red saber and then I'm going to fight this guy, and wow, it would be so awesome. I would be awesome. And you're like, well, would you? Put in the work. And then they're like, oh man, I can't even see, and it's really hot, and I'm really tired, and oh, I'm kind of bored, I don't want to do. And you're like, oh, okay, well, these guys are not going to cut the mustard. They're not going to be there long term. And so, yeah, finding people, it's less about quantity and more about quality. I think that is some of the most important parts. As some of you guys know, I've run into lots of different people and worked with many different people over the years, and some have stayed and some go. Some I have essentially fired, I guess is a good way of saying it. And I hope I'm not making it go into negative land, but it's just sort of like, look, this isn't for you, or we're not a good match anymore, and this kind of thing, based on how people move with me, like, if they're ethical, if they're not, and this kind of thing. So anyways, I probably said enough about that, but yeah, finding people can be tough, but you just gotta keep at it and build your team make it happen. I'm Nova, and may the Force be with ya. And have fun with your LED sabers.